What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another subscriber Q&A. You guys seem to like the last couple I've done, so we're going to keep on rolling with it. And as always, if I don't answer your question, it's not because I don't like you. It's not because I did not like the question. It's just because I'm trying to keep it in a format that is relatively tight, compact. And so I picked 12 questions for this one. Make sure to ask some more questions after you watch this video. If you have a question, it can be about grading, it could be about modern, vintage, comics, whatever it is. And we got a nice wide assortment. And a lot of the questions that I received were about Hasbro potentially going plastic-free for their blisters, for the packaging for vintage collection. And what's the impact there? So I pulled up a couple of them for this video, but I want to make sure that you guys are aware that we did a live stream that lasted a couple of hours over on Bossk Bounty's channel. I'll put a link to that live stream in the video description for this video, and make sure to go check that out. We talked at length about it. We all had different opinions about it. I had some relatively controversial opinions about it. So make sure to go watch that video if you haven't already. We had a great time. I really want to do some more live streams. I'm really lazy about them, so I apologize for that. This is my busy time of year for work, and so it's almost impossible to schedule anything in my life, especially now that my kids are getting out of school soon. So it's complete nonstop insanity at my household, but we're going to dig into some really great questions, a nice wide assortment of questions. The first one was from FNU LNU, and he said, question on the grading services or more about transit to and from. How much do you trust the process of getting your high-end figures to and from? And one of my friends had a high-end collectibles that were possibly stolen in transit. He's referring to Jeff Jacobs, one of the biggest Star Wars collectors out there. He sent $50,000 of Lily Lettys to AFA for grading. And I happened to see Jeff at a toy convention in the after-hours lobby sale when I was there. And I asked him, did you ever find those Lily Lettys? So as an update, the answer is no. He never got those back. So I feel really bad for him. I didn't want to dig in too much or pry about whether he's taking FedEx to task for not reimbursing him. They're trying to get out of reimbursing him for $50,000 of mint-on-card Lily Lettys. I didn't want to bother him about that, but I did confirm from Jeff himself that he has not found those items. So I feel bad for him. And so to answer FNU LNU's question, thank you so much for the question. I do in general trust the process. I've only had one item that was lost in transit. It was a sealed Atari video game. It was like Jedi Academy, Atari 2600 video game. It was factory sealed, beautiful condition, probably 85 plus 90 condition. It was delivered by USPS to the wrong address, and they did reimburse me for it, but it doesn't take away with the fact that I didn't get that item back. So I don't use USPS for anything valuable. I don't use them for anything, even vintage collection, collector grade from Big Bad Toy Store. If it's something I want to grade, I only use FedEx or UPS. I get full insurance. I know there's some of you out there that disagree with getting insurance, but if my items get lost in transit, I would like to get reimbursed for them. But as we just talked about, FedEx did not reimburse Jeff for his really high-end collectibles. So who knows whether it's even worth it to get insurance. But that's the only item I've ever gotten lost. But I trust FedEx and UPS to get my items. I've mainly been using UPS lately because they're a little bit less expensive, and the items seem to arrive less damaged. The other downside to the current economy right now, as you know, is that there's 11 million jobs still available. No one wants to work. Everyone's sitting on their butts right now. And the people that are working are maybe not that qualified. And I've noticed that FedEx in general, the boxes that arrive to me are a lot more damaged these days than what they used to be. So I don't use FedEx anymore. I use UPS for the most part, but it's a roll of the dice. I gotta tell you, if I had some really valuable items like those Lily Lettys or some like mint on card, like $50,000 of stuff, I'd fly them down there myself. I'd hand deliver them to the grading company if it's something I really had to get graded. So that's just my personal opinion on it. You can take it or leave it. Next up, Destiny Gamer 74 says, question for next time. As someone who left collecting 10 to 12 years ago and only just started again, but a lot has changed, mainly about loose U grading. And he's talking about uncirculated grading, where the grading companies used to take beat up mint on cards that submitters would send in. The grading companies would take it outside of the blister and grade it uncirculated. They don't do that anymore. That's to prevent people from damaging more and more mint on card items to get those really high loose graded figures. And so he said he's completed the full run of figures, all U85 and U90. Would this affect the value of my collection? Keep up the good work. Really enjoy your videos. Thank you, Destiny, for the question. And to answer your question directly, uncirculated loose grading, obviously, it's never going to happen again. With UKG, CAS has never done it, and AFA stopped, I think, in September of 2019, but don't quote me on that. So the bottom line is that you're never going to have uncirculated vintage figures anymore. UKG, to my knowledge, still does uncirculated modern figures, modern loose graded figures, but very few people send in modern figures for loose U grading. And you can still get uncirculated grading for modern mint on cards if you send in a sealed case. But to answer your question directly, the market has spoken, and uncirculated figures command a higher price premium. That's just the way it is. A lot of long-time collectors view uncirculated loose graded as something that they don't want in their collection, because it's got a negative connotation, because it means that somebody took it off of a mint on card and submitted it for grading uncirculated. But the market has spoken, and uncirculated graded figures command a higher dollar. That's just the way it is. So if you have the full run of 96 figures, all U85 and U90, I can promise you that your collection is worth a pretty penny. Now, he probably also has a lot of older case styles. And I did confirm, I had some uncirculated graded figures, loose graded figures that I sent in to get recased. I didn't particularly ask them to take the U label off there. And AFA did recase those. All the scores stayed the same, and all of the scores still included the uncirculated grading with the new updated case styles. So for whatever that's worth, if you have some uncirculated loose graded figures that you wanted to get the newer case style for, AFA does not remove the uncirculated designation from those figures on the label. Next up, Jeff Moore says, let's see. My next question is on comics. How can you look at a book and tell if it's worth getting graded? I have a Star Wars number 42, which is the first full comic book appearance of Boba Fett. The cover is great condition, but the pages have 3 factory square cutouts on the bottom of all of the pages. Do they affect the grade? Yes. That's like having a cutout proof of purchase on a mint on card figure. It will severely detract from the grading, and I can tell you right now, it's not worth getting them graded. You're going to get something really low. You're going to get a really low score for those. Probably 5 and below, 5.0 and below. So you're better off getting a better example that's either raw and sending it in yourself, or buying one that's already graded and being happy with that. But if you've got cutouts out of the book itself, they're going to severely detract from the grade. I don't know what the detraction is, but I can promise you it's substantial. Missing pages or missing parts of pages will really hurt the grade, and it's not worth getting them graded. Next up, this is from Adam Guggenheim. He is a Patreon supporter. Shout out to Adam. Thank you for the question. There have been many lines of 3 3/4 inch figures post original Kenner. Why have TVC blown up in price so much more than any other line? Is that true, and why? Yes, the answer is the TVC, for the most part, has blown up more. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I think the biggest reason is that the packaging most closely mimics the vintage Kenner run, right? The TVC looks like vintage Kenner. It's got that same look and feel. It's nostalgic. It harkens back to those 1980s figures. It's a nice reminder to collectors who were alive back then, and maybe children back then, that, wow, this really harkens back to the old days when I'd walk into Toys R Us and see pegs and pegs full of vintage Kenner stuff. And I think that's the main reason. The other main reason is that, a lot of these figures were not produced as part of the vintage Kenner line, the Mandalorian items, for example. And some of them are redone, right? We have finished the 96 campaign that Tim and Obi-Wan Kenobi are pushing for. A lot of the Facebook groups are pushing for. And when you get that Power Droid in the TVC packaging with the vintage style photo on there, it really brings back memories, and it's a lot cheaper way to collect a nice Power Droid mint on card versus spending $1,000 for a vintage Kenner version. So I think that's the main reason. But I will say this: there are a number of 3 3/4 inch lines post Kenner, like the Clone Wars, like the Saga collection. A number of different lines. The Legacy collection has some really expensive ones. A lot of those have blown up as the collectibles market has seen this massive run up in prices over the last few years. Those lines are no different. A lot of those have moved up in price, especially figures that are modern, that were produced in such low numbers, and that are not available on the Vintage Collection card backs. There's a number of Jedi, there's some different Clone Wars troopers, things like that, Evo Trooper, that haven't been produced in the TVC line, and people want those as part of their collection, whether it's loose or mint on card. And I mean, some of those prices mirror, if not go higher than Vintage Collection prices, and I've talked about them on my channel. If you go to the Modern Star Wars playlist on my channel, I cover a number of other toy lines other than Vintage Collection and some of the prices we've seen for some of those smaller lines, and the prices are pretty astounding. So I would say, though, that the TVC has gone up the most, and it will probably still be the same just because of the packaging for the most part. Now, Rocket City Sith, and shout out to Rocket City Sith. I got to meet him at the lobby sales at that toy convention, you know, kind of after hour stuff. I got to meet him in person. He was a great guy, really genuine, gracious, and Rocket City Sith, it was a pleasure to meet you. He says, John, with Hasbro going plastic free, even for TVC possibly, what kind of impact will this have on the grading companies? I would know it would seem like loose figures and comics are more prominent in the grading realm, but many people do carded figures as well. So I would actually argue that for modern stuff, most people are doing carded stuff. Most people don't loose grade modern figures. And the question, I think, is what is the impact going to be on TVC sales? Because they're kind of hand in hand. The number of TVC submissions to the grading companies very closely mimic what the popularity of the figure is. But if they go bubble free or plastic free for how the actual action figure is displayed, not only are you going to see a massive drop in the number of items purchased by collectors, but you're going to see a huge drop in the number of submissions by collectors. And the interesting thing that I found out, I spoke with a couple of the owners at Collector Archive Service. This is kind of tangentially related, okay? But hear me out. I asked them, what is your most popular toy line for submissions? And I fully expected it to be Vintage Collection or Vintage Kenner Star Wars items. And Star Wars is not number one at Collector Archive Services. I was really surprised to hear that. I thought for sure that it would be Vintage Kenner or Vintage Collection would have the most submissions. They certainly get a lot of those. They get a lot of those. But it's not. It's actually Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and some of those other lines, and G.I. Joe. Both of those have passed Star Wars, apparently, and they can correct me if I'm wrong if they watch this video, but Star Wars is not number one in terms of grading submissions, which I was absolutely shocked by. I thought for sure loose graded Kenner figures or mint on card TVC or mint on card Kenner would easily be number one at CAS, but that is not the case. But I do think that if Hasbro, and I think it's more like when Hasbro is my personal opinion on it, when Hasbro goes to plastic-free packaging for TVC, there's going to be a massive drop-off in the number of items that are purchased, and there's going to be a precipitous decline in the number of submissions for TVC items at AFA and CAS. I personally will stop collecting the line, and part of me is going to be kind of relieved because I can't keep up with all the submissions or with all the new releases anyway. So the plastic-free packaging for like those deluxe Boba Fett, Mandalorian, some of those figures, I don't have any desire to have a graded box. I just don't. If I'm going to get any graded boxes, it's going to be Vintage Kenner, mini rigs, or vehicles, things like that. I don't have the space to enjoy graded TVC Deluxe or even ungraded. So I think you'll see a pretty big drop off in sales, and I think Hasbro knows that. And my personal opinion is, you guys can go back and watch the live stream on Bossk Bounty's channel. My personal opinion is that that's what Hasbro wants. But it's not a popular opinion. It was not shared by anybody else in that live stream. But me personally, I think Hasbro wants to have a drop off in TVC because we're a demanding bunch, and I think that it's going to kill the line, in my opinion. Matthew Priest, he says, hey, John, if and when Hasbro goes with plastic-free packaging on TVC, and assuming a lot of collectors will stop collecting, which I think will absolutely be the case, do you see a big price spike in TVC 1.0 and 2.0 plastic bubble carded figures? Will they become more sought after? Yes, I do. We talked about for an hour about this in the live stream, so again, go back and watch that. We spent an hour just on talking about this one subject. And I do think that there's going to be a certain segment of the collecting community that when they stop collecting TVC, the completionist in them says, I can't collect them all. I'm going to dump it all. I'm selling all of it. And I think short term, after TVC goes bubble free, you're going to see a flood on the market and prices will drop. There's going to be about a 6 to 9 month window, in my opinion, where prices are going to drop off the face of the earth. And it's a great buying opportunity for those of you who are not going to stop collecting TVC 1.0 and 2.0 that have the blisters. So me personally, there's a lot of 1.0 that I'm missing in my collection because I started the line fairly late. I don't want them all. But I do think if there's a flood of sales on eBay and on Facebook for people who are just throwing their hands up saying, I'm done, then prices will drop. I think that will be short term, though. It'll be short term in nature. We'll start to see the prices creep back up again as the hardcore collectors are not going to get rid of their stuff. I'm not going to get rid of my plastic, bubble TVC 1.0 and 2.0. I think it's crazy to do that. I think that a lot of those, especially like the Canadian and some of those really unique name pills, some of those really low production figures, some of those highly sought after Ultimate Galactic Hunt foil cards or early TVC 1.0 that are unpunched, those are going to continue to go up in value long term. Ahsoka, I mean, there's a lot of really great TVC 1.0 that will continue to go up in price, in my opinion. But I think that short term, we could see a brief window of buying opportunity for those of us who are not getting out of the line or going to maybe use that as an opportunity to stop buying the new stuff, stop buying the new releases, and instead use our collecting dollars to fill in the gaps in our collection. And that's absolutely what I'm going to do. I'm going to quit buying the new stuff and use 100 or 200, 300 bucks or whatever the number is to go buy a really nice Grievous or go buy a nice Commander Gree, something like that. Gary Moore, shout out to Gary. He's a longtime subscriber. He says, have you ever cracked open a graded figure? I'm wondering how easy this would be, as those acrylic cases look really sturdy. Yes, I have done that several times. I've purchased loose graded figures and even carded figures where the cases have either been scuffed up or banged up, or the little pegs that hold the loose graded figure inside have either been damaged in shipping, or I got a great deal on one that was advertised on eBay and sold at auction with a broken peg. Sometimes you can get a pretty good deal on those. Now, you got to be careful, but you can use a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, and like a hammer, and very carefully tap along the seams. And Toy Polloy did a Is Grading a Scam? And in that video, he shows you how to crack open a figure. It's not that hard to do, but you do have to be careful, especially for mint on card figures. But I've done both, and the grades have come back exactly the same. I think I've done it 3 or 4 times, and the grades have come back exactly the same. One time I wanted to test an AFA 85, and I sent it in to CAS. And I cracked it open, and I sent it in loose. It came back exactly the same grade. I've done that for 3 different figures, if memory serves, for AFA graded figures that were then sent into CAS. I did it one time going from CAS to AFA, and all 4 of them that were loose graded vintage Kenner Star Wars figures, all 4 of them came back the same grade both ways. And I did it for one mint on card. I took a mint on card Cloud Car palette that had a really badly scuffed up case that was AFA graded. It was graded AFA 80 plus. I cracked it open, sent it to CAS. It came back with an 80 plus. So for whatever that's worth, it was an interesting exercise. I didn't record it. I probably should have, but it is possible to do it without damaging the figures, but you got to be really, really careful and be very patient with it. Frozen, he says, my next one would be if you think it'd be better to buy non-graded comics and sending them to CGC myself or buy already graded comics. From what I've heard, it seems like it would take much more time and be more expensive, especially since I'm from Germany. Well, number one, CGC does have a European arm. I believe it's located in London. So if you're in Europe, you don't have to send them overseas. You don't have to send raw books overseas. You can send them to the London branch. They will grade them there. I'm not positive on that, though, but I seem to remember seeing that on CGC's website, that they do have a London branch. So that's one. I could be wrong on that. But number two, I think it depends on the book. So for me, I do like to send in modern, new release stuff. I get them pressed first, and then I send them in for a CGC 9.8 pre-screen. And all the modern stuff in general, I'm about an 80 to 85% success rate for modern comics, where I've taken modern comics, got them pressed, and sending them in for a 9.8 pre-screen. My last one, I had 24 out of 25. And another one, I think I had 25 for 25. So you can do it. You can do it, but you got to be really picky. You really got to look for spine ticks. When I get in, let's say I ordered 10 comics, all the same book. I'll go through them pretty carefully and look for spine ticks. If it's got a color breaking spine tick along the spine, don't bother sending them in for a 9.8 pre-screen. It won't hit. I've tried it a few times and I've never gotten them through. I've had a few spine ticks that were non-color breaking. Usually CGC will allow a 9.8 if it's got 2 or less, 1/8 of an inch or less spine tick. It's got to be non-color breaking though. That's the key. If it's got the white coming through, it won't hit the 9.8. So hopefully that answers your question. ACW Drone Solutions, he says, can ask your thoughts on the Droids Cardback Edition 50th Anniversary TVC. Do you think all three will be sought after? And he's referring to the Target exclusives R2-D2, Yellow C-3PO droids, and then the Droids Boba Fett. And my opinion is all three of those will be highly sought after. They already sell for 2 or 3 times market, especially the R2-D2 and the Boba Fett, because they still have not come out here in the U.S. Boba Fett especially, I think, will continue to go up in price. I've got all three of those at CAS being graded right now. I was lucky enough to pick up 3 Super Mint examples from Boss Bounty. He was kind enough to send them to me from Star Action Figures. I've got all 3 of them at grading. They will be held in my collection unless something drastic happens financially with me until I die, because I really think that those will continue to creep up in value, especially the Boba Fett. You know, the Droids Vintage Kenner Boba Fett goes for $10,000 plus now. Okay, even ungraded examples go for insane money, but they are going to continue to go up because people can't afford that. Unless you got big bucks and deep pockets, none of us can afford those Droids Boba Fetts. I'm not going to spend $10,000 plus on a mint on card, especially for those, because they have yellow blisters and they're prone to cracking. There is no way I spend that kind of money on it. If you do, props to you, but I'm not going to do it personally. And I think that they're going to continue to go up because it's a nice, cheaper alternative, and they look fantastic on the card. They're probably some of my favorite vintage collection releases over the last 12 months. They're just beautiful. Gary Wallace, shout out to Gary. He's a Patreon supporter. I got to meet him at the latest toy show and at the After Hobbies lobby sales. I didn't go to the convention proper, but Gary Wallace, he says, Chris W., who's at Rogue 5 Toys, a good buddy of mine, he's recently gotten into the vintage Kenner Indiana Jones figures. He didn't just get into them, okay, Gary? Chris bought all 9 figures AFA graded at once. So he went from 0 to 150 million miles an hour overnight. He didn't hesitate at all. Completely just scorched earth policy. He bought all of them, and it hurt his wallet, I'm sure. But you know, AFA just started loose grading those Indiana Jones figures again, and they've got beautiful brand new cases for him. And Chris bought all 9 figures, so congrats to him. He says, are there any other toy lines that you collect, and if so, what? The answer is no. I don't. I used to have a really nice AFA vintage Hasbro G.I. Joe collection. I had like 85 or something like that. I think I had 85 mint on card AFA graded G.I. Joes, vintage G.I. Joes. And I sold them way too early. They were worth about 3 times that now from what I sold them for. But, you know, I just took all that money and I plowed it right back into vintage Kenner. So for me, no, I don't have any other action figure lines I collect. I just don't have the space. I collect TVC, I collect prototypes, and I collect vintage Kenner, and that's it. I do collect comics, and that's my way of accessing other toy lines, so to speak. You know, Wolverine, Daredevil, some of those new action figures, the retro line for the Marvel superheroes, they are so hot. They look so good, so good. I would love to get some of those retro style card backs, but I just don't have the space for them, so I'm staying away from it. It's so tempting. I've had them in my cart, collector grade, big bad toy store, retro Marvel superheroes with the vintage style card backs. I've had them in my cart several times, and every single time I've come to my senses and taken them out of my cart and not bought them. I just don't have the space, but they look fantastic. I'd love to have them. Some of those new G.I. Joe classified figures look incredible. I just don't have the space, unfortunately. Kevin L., he says, hi, John. How and why did you transition into buying and grading comics? I wanted something else to do, Kevin. I just wanted something else to do. The comic market intrigues me. It's got such massive fluctuations. I enjoy the price swings, the massive price swings. It's much more massive price swings up and down than for action figures. So I enjoy the tracking of key issue Star Wars and other comic lines, and tracking and how those fluctuations swing depending on new Disney Plus content or new movies that are being rumored. And I like trying to time the bottoms, you know, and sometimes I'm good at it, sometimes I overpay and then they come back down again. But I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's a nice alternative to action figures. It gives me something different to do. And quite frankly, I don't have any more space. So I started getting into comics because, oh, action figure gradier. This will be a lot less space. Well, the problem is I have like 200 some CGC 9.8 comics now. So that is out the window. But I really do enjoy grading comics. I think it's a fun process. It's a nice alternative. And I like the art aspect to it, the comic cover art. Some of those comic covers are just absolutely mind-blowing, and when they're in acrylic from CGC, they just look beautiful. To me, it's like it's a way to collect art outside of action figures, and I think that it's a cool side hobby. I also, you know, from an investment perspective, not that I do it for investment, but a lot of this stuff is worth money, right? And when I die, having those CGC graded comics, it's going to be really easy for my wife to sell those. She can dump them all on Comic Link or on Hakes, and people know exactly what they're getting with those beautiful slabs. And it's a nice asset diversification strategy. I consider collectibles to be one small portion of my overall investment portfolio, right? I've got real estate, I got stocks, and a very, very small portion, a portion that I don't care particularly what the prices do. I would like for them to go up. They've gone up nicely over the last few years especially, but it's a nice way to kind of diversify away from action figures if and when action figures go down in price and the number of buyers declines. You know, the comic market is a much broader market. There's a lot more people collecting graded comics, believe it or not, than graded action figures. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. There's too many people out there that collect Superman comics. Some of those Superman comics from the 1940s, they go for, you know, $1 million. Well, the reason is there's a lot larger buyer pool for those than there are for graded action figures. And that's why if you look at some of the graded comics that are really, really expensive, like, you know, Amazing Fantasy 15s with the first Spider-Man, some of the Batman comics, those are big, big money items, big ticket items. And I'm just collecting my little small nut in this world as a squirrel. I'm a squirrel, you know, hoarding away my little slabs, and I'm hoping to enjoy the beautiful artwork and show those off on the channel. And it's pretty cool to have like another kind of side focus that takes up a lot less space, but it is adding up. It adds up pretty quick. Finally, Prune Productions keeps asking this, so I'm going to go ahead and get it out of the way. He says, I'm going to keep asking this until you put it on a video. Would you sell your collection to build your dream fish room? Would you keep one set for yourself? Don't worry. I have no idea what Chris is talking about, but no, I'm not going to sell off my entire collection to build my fantasy tropical fish room. I think it's an interesting prospect. If that's what you're into, Chris, congratulations. You're probably picking a pretty good time to sell off your collection, because I think prices are towards a peak right now in everything. Any hard asset, we're at peak prices right now because of inflation, whether it's real estate or stocks or collectibles. So if you decide you want to sell off your collection to build your dream tropical fish room, just keep in mind that you're taking assets that are an appreciating asset and you're investing it in an asset that's going to die. Fish die, Chris, okay? They die. That's an asset that goes down in value, not up. So just keep that in mind. Also, I want to point out that your avatar that you're using right here is an item that I traded to you, and that asset has gone up a lot more than my graded Ahsoka, which has done nothing but go down in value. You're welcome. That's all I had for this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back soon.